In the Arctic there are 4 clearly distinguished seasons, warm summers, and an abundance of plant and animal life, none of which can be said of the Antarctic. The Eskimo live as far north as the 79th parallel, whereas in the south no native man is found higher than the 56th. W.R. Chambers, in Arctic Explorations, wrote, "Beyond the 70th degree of southern latitude, not a tree meets the eye. Wearied with the white waste of snow, forests, woods, even shrubs have disappeared, and given place to a few lichens and creeping woody plants, which scantily clothe the indurated soil. Still, in the farthest north, nature claims her birthright of beauty, and in the brief and rapid summer she brings forth numerous flowers and grasses to bloom for a few days, to be again blasted by the swiftly recurring winter. The rapid fervor of an Arctic summer had already, June 1st, converted the snowy waste into luxuriant pasture ground, rich in flowers and grass, with almost the same lively appearance as that of an English meadow." In New Zealand, situated at 42 degrees southern latitude, on the winter solstice the sun rises at 4:31 a.m. and sets at 7:29 p.m., making the longest day of the year 14 hours and 58 minutes. On the summer solstice, the New Zealand sun rises at 7:29 a.m. and sets at 4:31 p.m., making the shortest day 9 hours and 2 minutes long. Meanwhile, in England, a full 10 degrees farther north of the equator than New Zealand lies south, the longest day is 16 hours and 34 minutes, the shortest day 7 hours and 45 minutes. Therefore, the longest day in New Zealand is 1 hour and 36 minutes shorter than the longest day in England, and the shortest day in New Zealand is 1 hour and 17 minutes longer than the shortest day in England. William Swainson, an Englishman who emigrated and became Attorney General of New Zealand in the mid-19th century, lived in both countries for decades and wrote of their differences, stating, "The range of temperature is limited, there being no excess of either heat or cold. Compared with the climate of England, the summer of New Zealand is but very little warmer, though considerably longer. Even in summer, people here have no notion of going without fires in the evening. But then, though the days are very warm and sunny, the nights are always cold. For 7 months last summer we had not one day that the sun did not shine as brilliantly as it does in England in the finest day in June, and though it has more power here, the heat is not nearly so oppressive. But then there is not the twilight which you get in England. Here it is light till about 8 o'clock, then in a few minutes it becomes too dark to see anything, and the change comes over in almost no time. The seasons are the reverse of those in England. Spring commences in September, summer in December, autumn in April, and winter in June. The days are an hour shorter at each end of the day in summer, and an hour longer in the winter than in England." In the flat earth model of the cosmos, these Arctic and Antarctic phenomena are easily accounted for and exactly what would be expected. If the sun circles over and around the earth every 24 hours, steadily traveling from tropic to tropic every 6 months, it follows that the northern, central region would annually receive far more heat and sunlight than the southern circumferential region. Since the sun must sweep over the larger southern region in the same 24 hours it has to pass over the smaller northern region, its passage must necessarily be proportionally faster as well. This is why the Antarctic morning dawn and evening twilight are very abrupt, whereas in extreme north twilight continues for hours after sunset, and many midsummer nights the sun does not set at all. Dr. Samuel Robotham said, "If the sun is fixed and the earth revolves underneath it, the same phenomena would exist at the same distance on each side of the equator. But such is not the case. What can operate to cause the twilight in New Zealand to be so much more sudden, or the nights so much colder than in England? The southern hemisphere cannot revolve more rapidly than the northern. The latitudes are about the same, and the distance round a globe would be the same at 50 degrees south as at 50 degrees north, and as the whole would revolve once in 24 hours, the surface at the two places would pass underneath the sun with the same velocity, and the light would approach in the morning and recede in the evening in exactly the same manner. Yet the very contrary is the fact. The constant sunlight of the north develops, with the utmost rapidity, numerous forms of vegetable life, and furnishes subsistence for millions of living creatures. But in the south, where the sunlight never dwells or lingers about a central region, but rapidly sweeps over sea and land, to complete in 24 hours the great circle of the southern circumference, it has not time to excite and stimulate the surface, and therefore, even in comparatively low southern latitudes, everything wears an aspect of desolation. These differences in the north and south could not exist if the earth were a globe, turning upon axes underneath a non-moving sun. The two hemispheres would at the same latitudes have the same degree of light and heat, and the same general phenomena, both in kind and degree. The peculiarities which are found in the south as compared with the north are only such as could exist upon a stationary plane, having a northern center, concentric with which is the path of the moving sun. And William Carpenter wrote, "Every year the sun is as long south of the equator as he is north, and if the earth were not stretched out as it is, in fact, but turned under, as the Newtonian theory suggests, it would certainly get as intensive a share of the sun's rays south as north, but the southern region being, in consequence of the fact stated, far more extensive than the region north, the sun, having to complete his journey round every 24 hours, travels quicker as he goes further south, from September to December, and his influence has less time in which to accumulate at any given point. Since, then, the facts could not be as they are if the earth were a globe, it is a proof that the earth is not a globe." The midnight sun is a phenomenon experienced by observers north of the Arctic Circle during summer solstice, where the sun can be seen circling over and around 360 degrees without ever setting. Depending how far north the observer is, the sun can be seen for several days or weeks, rising and falling as usual, but never fully setting beyond the horizon. This is because the sun, having reached the Tropic of Cancer, is making its tightest, narrowest circle over the earth, so much so that observers positioned centrally within the Arctic Circle are never at any time significantly far enough away from the sun for it to set beyond their horizon. Not until after summer solstice, when the sun makes its way back towards the equator, will the sun set completely and the Arctic days begin getting shorter. Meanwhile, in the Antarctic during summer solstice, the sun disappears completely for over 2 months, leaving everyone below the Antarctic Circle in bitter cold darkness from mid-May to mid-July. Again, this is because the sun, narrowing and tightening its path towards the Tropic of Cancer, means it has moved significantly far enough away from the Antarctic perimeter so as not to be seen by observers positioned so far south. Not until mid-July, when the sun expands and widens its path back significantly far enough, will Antarctic observers again be able to see the sun above the horizon and the Antarctic days begin getting longer. In order to fit the heliocentric globe model, this midnight sun phenomenon must also occur for observers south of the Antarctic Circle during winter solstice. Depending how far south the observer is, the sun should be seen for several days or weeks, never fully setting, just like it does in the north. In reality, however, there is never 24-hour sunlight anywhere in Antarctica at any time of year. During winter solstice, when the sun is circling its widest path over and around the Tropic of Capricorn, observers far enough south will experience extended daylight hours due to proximity with the sun, but will still observe it to rise and set beyond the horizon completely every single day. In fact, this is why the Arctic and Antarctic climates are so strikingly dissimilar, because of the drastically different amount of sunlight received by each. Based on the heliocentric globe model, both the Arctic and Antarctic receive comparable amounts of sunlight every year, and so should have comparable temperatures, seasonal changes, and ability to sustain plant and animal life, but in reality differ greatly in these ways. Antarctica is by far the coldest place on Earth, with an average annual temperature of approximately negative 57 degrees Fahrenheit, and a record low of negative 135.8. The average annual temperature at the North Pole, however, is a comparatively warm 4 degrees. Throughout the year, temperatures in the Antarctic vary less than half the amount at comparable Arctic latitudes. The northern Arctic region enjoys moderately warm summers and manageable winters, whereas the southern Antarctic region never even warms enough to melt the perpetual snow and ice. The island of Kerguelen at 49 degrees southern latitude has only 18 species of native plants that can survive its hostile climate. Compare this with the island of Iceland at 65 degrees northern latitude, 16 degrees further north of the equator than Kerguelen is south, yet Iceland is home to 870 species of native plants. On the Isle of Georgia, just 54 degrees southern latitude, the same latitude as Canada or England in the north, where dense forests of various tall trees abound, the infamous Captain Cook wrote that he was unable to find a single shrub large enough to make a toothpick. In the Arctic, there are 4 clearly distinguished seasons, warm summers, and an abundance of plant and animal life, none of which can be said of the Antarctic. The Eskimo live as far north as the 79th parallel, whereas in the south, no native man is found higher than the 56th. Since this one fact would destroy the heliocentric globe model, there is, and has been since the 1950s, an Antarctic treaty signed by over 50 countries banning all independent travel and exploration of the Antarctic. Excluding overpriced chaperoned penguin tours and government-approved contractors, nobody is allowed to step foot in Antarctica, especially not during winter solstice when there should supposedly be constant 24-hour sunlight. Since this particular lie is so important to the heliocentric facade, if you search online, you will find a couple videos purporting to show 24-hour sunlight in Antarctica, but just like the rest of the globe's pathetic video evidence, they are all fake. The most popular video allegedly showing an Antarctic 24-hour time-lapse actually has mountains accidentally layered over the video's text layer, proving it to be a calculated fraud. Other videos simply show an Arctic midnight sun time-lapse, but claim it to be from Antarctica. There are dozens of clearly genuine videos you can see online of the Arctic midnight sun, and you can freely travel above the Arctic Circle to experience it for yourself. Conversely, however, there are only a couple clearly fake videos online of the supposed Antarctic midnight sun, and you cannot ever freely travel there to experience it for yourself. Many people think that modern astronomy's ability to accurately predict lunar and solar eclipses is a result and proof positive of the heliocentric theory of the universe. The fact of the matter, however, is that eclipses have been accurately predicted by cultures worldwide for thousands of years before the heliocentric ball Earth was even a glimmer in Copernicus's imagination.